You want to be a champion in your fantasy football league? Of course you do. You know it takes a few things for that to happen. First of all, it's the knowledge, the preparation. That's why we're here with you all season long. It takes a lot of luck. Let's just face it, right? Some good luck and not having that battle go against you. But look, what it really takes when it comes down to it, these teams that wind up winning it all at the end of the fantasy football season, they have that elite player, especially at the running back position, that one guy who just dominates on a weekly basis. But who's going to do it for the end of this season? Because the guys who might have carried you all up until this point may not be those star players come playoff time. So let's break it down and figure out who are the top 10 running backs for this year's postseason. Hopefully you have at least one of these guys, if not two, on your squad. If so, you're in good shape. But we're going to tell you who has the most favorable schedule from weeks 15 through 17 and who's just on a roll. It's going to keep it going. And these names, at least in this order, may not be obvious. I'll just tell you right now, couldn't have imagined at the season start, at any point really up until right now, I'm actually sitting here doing this, that Saquon Barkley wouldn't even be a top 10 running back for the fantasy playoffs. But here we are. I can't put him on the list. There's just no way I can do it. I know a lot of you are thrilled to get a guy like Rico Dowdle. He's been so good, but the way things are going right now, he didn't make the cut either. What about promising rookies like Ashton Jeanty and RJ Harvey? Are they going to make the cut? Let's find out. And by the way, if we've helped you get this far and you're making the playoffs in your fantasy league, well, first of all, congrats. Let's keep it going. Want to get that win. If we have helped you in any way this season, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. That helps us out tremendously. All right, let's count it down. Starting at number 10, guy who's been just a solid low-end RB1 all season long and should keep it going. It's Javonte Williams of the Cowboys. This is a team that is trending upwards at the right time, peaking, and they're fighting to make the playoffs, and Javonte Williams has been a big part of it. I know the receivers are getting all the headlines, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, of course, Dak Prescott, but man, without that run game, it wouldn't happen. You don't just score all these points without a solid running back, and Javonte has been doing it. Now, it feels like he's slowed down a little bit compared to the start of the season, but not that much. I mean, let's face it, he's just been consistent. And look, there's nothing wrong with a guy who is solid and consistent week after week, even if the spike weeks aren't as noticeable as some other running backs. I mean, on the season, he's the RB7 in total points. And so far, he's also the RB9 in fantasy points per game. That's an RB1. And look, he hasn't missed time. He's got no competition for targets here. There's nothing to worry about with a guy who is in an elite offense here. He's got touchdown upside every single week. Schedule is decent, not great, but it's not terrible either. They get the Vikings, they get the Chargers, and they get the Commanders, especially if it's week 17. You get Dallas, Washington. That could be a very good one for all parties involved there in fantasy. So if you got Javonte Williams, yeah, pretty much set and forget. At number 9, a guy that's been a must start pretty much all season long, it's Josh Jacobs. Now, you might be surprised to see why Jacobs is this low. I mean, if he's a must start, one of these elite running backs, I mean, what's the deal here? Is it injury related? I mean, that's not a major factor. I mean, of course, he missed a game. He came back, on Thanksgiving, had 17 carries, 83 yards. Totally fine. He's going to be the bell cow. I'm not really worried anymore about Emmanuel Wilson seeing too many touches. So, yeah, Jacobs still has bell cow status. He's still on a good team. And this is a team with a good defense, which helps the run game. Yeah, Jacobs is as solid as it gets. And so the only reason I won't put him higher here, the schedule is, again, not as favorable as some of these other running backs that I will talk about. They do get the Bears in 2 of the next few weeks, but look, most of the time, your fantasy playoffs don't start at week 14. So even though we're putting this out now ahead of time, I'm assuming weeks 15 through 17 are your fantasy playoffs. I'm not taking the week 14 matchups really into account here. So if so, that might bump it up a notch because he gets the Bears in week 14 and then gets the Bears again in a couple weeks, but they're on the road against Denver in week 15. Not an ideal situation. And Jacobs, again, just compared to these other elite running backs, doesn't get quite as much work in the passing game. So, again, if you have Jacobs, it's pretty much a no-brainer to start him. He's just not my favorite running back in the playoffs. At number 8, well, definitely lower than last year, but at least he still makes the list, unlike Saquon. We're going to go with King Derrick Henry. And so, Henry has had to do so much heavy lifting in this offense because, let's face it, even since he's come back and he's been playing, Lamar Jackson just does not look the same. There's no way he is 100% healthy. He's just not running that much. And when he does run, does not look like the same guy. So they're going to need Derrick Henry down the stretch. And again, this is a team fighting to try to make the postseason, maybe even win their division, believe it or not, after the way they started. And so Derrick Henry, well, he's now coming on as well, since Lamar at least is out there. Over the past 4 weeks, Derrick Henry is the RB7 in fantasy. You know he can score every single week. That's just a given. And so as far as the schedule goes, it doesn't get better than this for the first round of your playoffs. The Cincinnati Bengals in Week 15. Yeah, he could be the overall highest scorer in fantasy that week. We'll see if that happens, though it didn't happen the last time these two teams met. He did wind up with 104 total yards and a touchdown. Good, but again, it's the Bengals. You figure Derrick Henry could go for like 200. Look, it's still possible. Maybe that happens this next time out. But look, it's a great matchup no matter what. And then New England, that's a tough one. At Green Bay, another tough one. So this is why Derrick Henry, despite being Derrick Henry, can't get any higher on this list. It's the schedule. Now at number 7, let's go Bucky Irving right back into it. He came back after such a long absence, and he looked totally fine, looked explosive, had that touchdown, should have had another touchdown. But most importantly, he is the guy here in Tampa. And I've said this a lot on the live streams and other videos over and over again. I really think this Tampa Bay offense is going to be super helpful during the offense, much better than they have been lately. Early in the season, of course, you wanted all the parts of this Tampa offense, and then it just all fell apart. Everybody got hurt at receiver except for Ibuka, and Bucky was hurt too. And the running back was like musical chairs here. Who do we start on a weekly basis? Baker Mayfield was hurt. He hasn't looked great. I think it's going to all come together now. They're getting all their pieces back healthy. Mike Evans might even be back soon, if not this week, for the fantasy playoffs. And Bucky, again, he looks totally fine here. If he does get some more work as a pass catching back, which he had been doing early in the season, right? He didn't quite have that role in week 13. But again, first week back, they're easing him into action. I know Rachaad White is still there, but if Bucky Irving gets used the way that he had been used early in this season, Dwayne McFarland, in his utilization reports, he said it himself, he feels like he's a mid-range RB1, and that's exactly where I'm putting him here. Now, even if he doesn't, if they give Rachaad White a few more carries and also that work as a pass catcher on third downs, Bucky is still an RB1. He's in a good offense. He's a good explosive runner. He's got touchdown upside. And it just so happens that depending on, all these different sites and all these different various reports as far as strength of schedule, there's different ways to slice it. But almost all of them have Tampa Bay with one of the easiest schedules remaining for the rest of the season. Sharp Football, Warren Sharp, they have Tampa Bay as the number 1 easiest strength of schedule remaining. Now, I'm just looking at week 15 through 17, as I said. But look, if your playoffs start now, if you're just fighting to make the playoffs, you've got to have Bucky in your lineup because he gets the Saints in week 14, and it just gets easier from there. Now we're on to number 6, and yeah, you might be a little surprised to find out. Here we go. It's JT. No, guy Jonathan Taylor, who has been the number 2 running back in fantasy all season long. He's not number 2. He's not even top 5 for the playoffs. What gives? It's the schedule. According to that same Sharp Football analysis, the Colts have the number 1 hardest remaining strength of schedule. And look, as far as running backs go, it's just not going to be the easy one. In week 15 at Seattle, we know that they're one of the toughest run defenses out there still. They allow the fewest yards per carry to running backs out of any team in the NFL, 3.51. And at Seattle, always a tough spot. And then the 49ers, okay, that defense is not what it used to be. That's not a bad matchup. But then in week 17, potentially your fantasy championship, get to face the Jaguars. And again, that Jags defense is legit. And on the season, they now are number 4 in terms of fewest yards per carry allowed to running backs, 3.7. The Jags on the season have given up the fewest rushing yards total to running backs and only 4 TDs on the year. Now, if there's a guy who can get away with having a good game against a good defense, surely it's JT. But at the same time, we have to face the fact this Colts defense hasn't been quite as dynamic as it was early in the season. Daniel Jones fighting through injuries, give him credit. But look, if he can't run, that lack of mobility here, that does limit them a little bit. So JT, again, there's no world in which you're sitting Jonathan Taylor, but I just don't know if he's going to carry you single-handedly to your championship like it looked he might do early this season. At number 5, it's De'Von Achane of the Dolphins, a team that, if you haven't been paying attention, at least not to them specifically, you got to realize this is a different team than it was early in the year. I mean, if you just manage to somehow erase, the first 6 weeks of the season, this is a playoff team. Now, again, that seems laughable, but honestly, if you look at the record here, they're winning games. They've won 4 of their last 5. That defense went from being one of the worst run defenses in the first month of the year to actually a top 10 run defense. And so, of course, all that said means the running back, De'Von Achane, he's able to do work. I mean, this team doesn't just have to sit back and pass it, thankfully, because that would not lead to good things. But Achane is their leading rusher. He's their leading receiver, too. He is everything in this offense, and why not? He can handle it. He's just one of the best pure runners in the game. And for what it's worth, Mike McDaniel definitely knows how to utilize his skill set. And the schedule for Achane down the stretch, it really couldn't be much better. Kind of lucky because unless you're in one of those actually horrible leagues that forces you to play your fantasy championship in the final week of the season, week 18, which if that's the case, you need to leave that league right now and not come back. But look, they get the Patriots, which we know is the worst matchup for them, especially against a running back. That's in week 18. You should be able to avoid that in most of your fantasy leagues. So after this week, which by the way, they get the Jets in week 14, but if you're talking just 15 through 17, you're looking at the Steelers defense, the Cincinnati Bengals, and then Tampa Bay. And keep in mind, again, Tampa Bay, not a shutdown run defense anymore. They've fallen down to just middle of the pack. And over the past month, that defense is actually subpar. So it almost doesn't matter the matchup here for Achane because he's used so much. But the schedule is just great. And this Dolphins team is, for whatever it's worth, looking better. At number 4, let's put Bijan Robinson right here. I know it always feels like anything lower than top 2 is too low for Bijan. But of course, this is a different version of the Falcons offense. There are still questions. Kirk Cousins being there, Drake London in and out of the lineup. And, this Falcons team is basically a little bit schizophrenic. Let's face it. We were worried about Bijan just a little bit. I mean, not me personally, but there was cause for some concern. You expect a guy who's going to be elite every week. And there was a stretch with 4 straight games where he didn't even reach 100 total yards. And for a guy who's such a good pass catcher, that's worrisome. Back to normal, though. Righted the ship, at least he did, because now in his past 3, he's gone over 100 yards, 3 touchdowns in the last 3. He's shown that he is basically everything in this offense. Even Kirk Cousins cannot hold Bijan down. And even if Drake London comes back right now or next week, it's not going to affect Bijan's output. So the schedule here almost doesn't matter, but for what it's worth, it's not that bad. At Tampa Bay this coming week, and as I said, that's not a bad spot at all. At Arizona the next week in week 16, again, that's just fine as terms of matchups go, middle of the road. Does get the Rams in week 17, which, again, that's kind of just that tiebreaker. We're splitting hairs when we talk about these elite running backs. That's the only reason I got him down at 4. At 3, again, above guys like JT and Bijan, I'm putting James Cook in here. Like, James Cook is getting stronger as the season goes on. He's already been great all year, right? Definitely consistent, giving you those ceiling games, not just floor like last year, not just relying on touchdowns like everybody thought he would do. Oh no, he is RB6 on the season. Again, just in the last 3 games, we've seen his rushing output 114, 129, and 177 yards. And that's why over the last 6 weeks, he is the RB3 in fantasy. And if you remember last year, James Cook had a strong finish to the season where he had a total of 5 touchdowns in the last 4 games. He scored basically every week throughout the fantasy playoffs. I don't see any reason why he couldn't do that again. And look, he's just one of these players who's on a team that's going to commit to the run. Buffalo, not only one of the top teams in terms of just rush play percentage, also in terms of goal line carries. Inside the 10, Buffalo is number 1 in terms of play calling. They're going to run the ball. Now, of course, I understand it's a lot of it because they have a rushing quarterback in Josh Allen, who also scores on the ground almost every week. But it's not just Allen, it's also James Cook, right? These guys are going to take turns scoring touchdowns on a weekly basis, if not doing it both at the same time. James Cook really could be one of the top fantasy backs for your fantasy playoffs. Keep in mind, I'm saying this even though he doesn't have one of the better schedules. during the fantasy playoffs at New England, at Cleveland. Those aren't great matchups. And then that Philly matchup, well, that looked tough until we saw the Bears humiliate them on the ground. So not too worried. But look, the point is, I'm just not worried about James Cook at all. This guy's going to be counted on, especially we got these cold weather games. Buffalo is going to be one of these teams that will commit to the run no matter what. So I got James Cook third. Number 2, let's go with Jahmyr Gibbs. Yeah, so Jahmyr Gibbs, a guy that you didn't think would have bell cow status, but here we go. All of a sudden, this narrative of David Montgomery disappearing, it just gets stronger. I mean, I don't know what's going on here, but Monty is not part of the mix hardly at all. And especially since Dan Campbell started taking over play calling duties, we've seen Monty less involved. He hasn't hit double-digit carries in over a month. Over the past 3 weeks, got Jahmyr Gibbs handling 71% of all the rushes, and that means he's accounting for 72.5% of the expected fantasy points in that backfield. This is not a split. And as I said at the very beginning here, what you want in an elite player, well, what you need to win a championship basically is a player who'll have those huge weeks, right? The guy who can just put his team on his back and say, I'm the guy, and do that for your fantasy team too. And nobody has spike weeks quite like Jahmyr Gibbs. We've seen it recently, and we've seen it consistently this season. And here's the other thing, take into account, Amon-Ra St. Brown, going to miss at the very least 1 week, maybe 2, who knows how long. And so Jahmyr Gibbs is just going to be more of a focal point in this offense, not just as a runner, of course, but also as a pass catcher. As we've seen, Laporta is also out. And the Lions, man, they are struggling to try to just make the postseason, which nobody thought would happen. And it seems like, Campbell's just decided it's going to be through Jahmyr Gibbs. Those final 3 games, week 15 through 17, Rams, Steelers, Vikings, none of those worry me in the slightest. Now, who's number 1? You probably already know. Have not yet mentioned the guy who's the number 1 player in all of fantasy at the running back position. It's Christian McCaffrey. Why wouldn't he be number 1 here? Well, look, it isn't just what he's done already, what he's going to do. As I keep saying, this 49ers offense now should be at its best. We didn't have Brock Purdy for several weeks. He's back. Seems like he's healthy. George Kittle is back at full strength. They've got all these pieces coming back. They got a bye week now to actually rest, which just means from week 15 on, they should be at full strength. Not that it matters too much, but strength of schedule, not even an issue here. Fantasy Pros has the 49ers in terms of the running back position with the 6th easiest schedule for the rest of the season. But again, it doesn't matter. It's CMC. He's going to be elite every week. This guy has 13 touchdowns in 13 games. You almost know he's got a touchdown in the bank every week. He's only gotten under 100 total scrimmage yards 3 times all season. And for your playoffs, you get to face the Titans, the Colts, and then the Bears defense. Yeah, CMC, if you took a chance on drafting him, remember when that felt risky before the season? Yeah, he's a guy who's probably just going to lead you to the ship. And a quick word about who barely missed the cut. If you watch March Madness, you always talk more about the first 4 out than the last 4 in. I tell you who barely missed the cut here. I thought about Breece Hall. Again, it's not just that he's on the Jets in this offense. Breece Hall does have those spike weeks in him. It just seems like it's always one or the other, right? He'll do something as a receiver or as a rusher, or he'll score, but not all at once. And so I like Breece Hall in my lineup, but he's not a guy I feel like is going to be top 10. And then talk about strength of schedule a whole lot. Chase Brown, in fact, go back to that Fantasy Pros strength of schedule analyzer. They got the Bengals with the number 1 best strength of schedule for running backs. The problem is Samaje Perine is back, which you wouldn't think matters, but it matters because just in week 13, we saw all of a sudden Chase Brown's snap share plummet. He's not bell cow status anymore, so I can't put him as a top 10 running back. And then rookie Ashton Jeanty, it's the Raiders offense is just not good. I mean, he gives you such a high floor because he's catching so many passes on a weekly basis. Sure, he could score on a weekly basis, but we just don't have enough in terms of upside because he's still stuck on the Raiders. And I will say, just on the outside, barely looking in, I still got Kyren Williams as a low-end RB1. Of course, there's some concern about Blake Corum. Kyren Williams is still the guy in a great offense. It's just the Rams' strength of schedule isn't the greatest for the playoffs. You're still starting Kyren every week. Don't get me wrong. I just don't have him in my top 10. Who makes the list for the wide receiver top 10 in terms of fantasy playoffs? Well, you can check that video out and everything else you need to win right here, right now to make your playoffs in this playlist.